continuing here with our top story. For more on this topic, I'm joined live by environmentalist Bjorn Lomborg. Good evening to you, Bjorn. I'll start with my question straight off the bat here. Do you think the Copenhagen Climate Change Summit is being undermined by the skeptics?
Well, first of all, I've got to say I'm not a skeptic myself, but there are some skeptics here, and I think fundamentally we need skeptical voices, perhaps not so much on the science part, which is what these guys focus on, but much more on the policy side, because these are turning out to be very difficult negotiations, and we need smarter solutions.
Bjorn, if I may, do you think the skeptics have their own agenda?
Well, of course they do, just like virtually everyone else here. There are many, many different agendas, and obviously some of these skeptics simply want us to stop talking about global warming. Some of the skeptics have very legitimate claims and very legitimate points. We've seen from the ClimateGate stories that there are problems in some of the data and certainly in some of the ways, for instance, peer review is being tackled. And quite frankly, Roy, if we are going to be spending the biggest sum of money ever spent on human history on fighting climate change, we want to know that we're right. So we should listen to what the climate skeptics have to say, both on the science and on the policy. But we should also recognize that the vast number of scientists are telling us global warming is real, it's man-made, and it is an important problem.
Bjorn, how likely is the summit to adopt specific emissions targets?
Well, unfortunately, I think it's rather likely that they will come out with some sort of target. Probably, if we look at the leaked summary from yesterday, it looks like they're going to set a target for 2050. And of course, that's very, very easy to set, because nobody's going to be around when 2050 actually rolls by. So to a very large extent, it looks like the summit will have a successful conclusion, but unfortunately, it will simply be beautiful words, not necessarily backed up by action. Let's just remember, the last 18 years, we've been following the same basic position. We've been promising carbon cuts, but not actually living up to them. In 1992 in Rio, we promised to cut carbon emissions, yet we did no such thing. In Kyoto, we promised to cut even more carbon emissions, and yet we're doing virtually no such thing. So getting here together in Copenhagen by the end of 2009 and saying, now we're going to cut, rings a little hollow.
Bjorn, if no specific results are agreed upon during this, and if the summit essentially collapses, would it be a victory for so-called ClimateGate supporters?
I think it would be portrayed as a victory for that, but whether it's a victory for climate and whether it's a victory for us actually tackling the problem depends very much on what happens next. I've just tried to argue that essentially the policy that we're following right now will lead to virtually no results, and we know this because it hasn't for the last 18 years. But if we take such a failure as a way to find a smarter way forward, climate economists are telling us investing a lot more into research and development into green energy technologies, low carbon energy sources, would actually do a great deal of good for climate. By making these technologies much cheaper for the future, we could possibly actually find a both cheap, a doable, and a way that would actually fix climate change in the medium term. So there is definitely possibilities that this would not just be a failure, a victory for skeptics, but that we could actually get to a point where it would be a victory for the climate and the environment as well.
Bjorn Lomborg, an environmentalist attending the Climate Change Summit in Copenhagen. Thanks very much for that.